Hi, Richie.
Hi, Sin.
Hi, everyone. Today we have a very special guest on a very special podcast.
Who is it?
Introduce yourself, special guest.
Hello, Sinclair. Dalek Sex speaking. The last time we spoke, I had a devastatingly clever opening gambit about how I have my eyes closed because this podcast has told me that if you close your eyes, you get to summon Redgrave. And I thought it would take you by surprise, but I frequently forget that you're a scientist and you're several degrees of cleverness more clever than me. And then we ended up having to re-record the same joke twice. And then last week you texted me to say that you'd lost all the audio. So I'm just not going to bother this time. To sit here and weep inwardly.
Yeah, that audio was cursed. First we had to re-record things, then something happened, then in the end everything cut out completely. So I had to record myself doing an outro being like, well, everything cut out, so I'm just gonna summarize what we did today.
Oh yeah, that was the one that my computer died the day before we were supposed to record
Exactly,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was just cursed all around.
It was.
Yeah.
And then the audio just got corrupted.
Fine, to be frank, it was not our best work.
All work we do is our best work.
I feel like you should be putting that on a motivational poster with like a cat hanging upside down from something.
Our surfer was described today as not the worst thing I've seen.
And today we're going to talk about a myth, or perhaps a Yharnam legend, or perhaps reality. We're going to talk about a widespread belief that beast blood crept up the right leg.
Old hunter trousers that protected countless hunters from beasts in an older age. A widespread belief of the period was that beast blood crept up the right leg, and this led to the double-wrapped belt.
The old hunter trousers, are they the first item description that tell us about Beasthood creeping up the right leg?
They are, I think, the only one.
They are the only one.
Well, okay, they're the only one. There's another pair of old hunter trousers that mention a different superstition. So they sort of... The DLC does it more than the base game, but they go into all these sort of superstitions in legends that the Yharnamites would tell each other. Yeah. Because when we arrive in Yharnam, it's already ruined. Whereas the DLC, it involves stuff from when the hunters were more of a thing, so you get these stories about little Yharnam legends. So, like, the one we're looking at now, it talks about the belief that the beast blood crept up the right leg. But then there's another pair of old hunter trousers that talk about how they would wear... that certain metals, if you wore them, the metal would ward off the beast blood.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Volta constable set that talks about how the Yharnamites would sort of tell each other these stories about foreigners all the time being foolish. And then it specifies that that wasn't true. They would just tell these stories to each other while they were drinking blood cocktails together to sort of remind themselves that, to sort of like reaffirm their xenophobia, basically.
That's where the blood drunk hunter's eye comes from.
Yeah.
They're just drunk.
You know what I've noticed?
What?
A lot of the corpses that have blood cocktails on them, they're posed so they're leaning up against a wall outside. So I think it's literally meant to be like alcoholic vagrants in Yharnam that died while they were drinking.
Oh, damn.
Well, I have
Yeah.
something that relates to that. I've been doing a lot of research on diseases that are associated with the right side of the body.
Right.
One of them is that it's obviously alcoholism because the liver's on the right.
Oh, okay.
And I had discounted that out of hand for the simple reason that alcohol isn't really a thing in Yharnam. They drink blood instead. What you've just said
There's that other little set piece at the start in that very dark house on the way to the bridge, because you see there's like a corpse with a blood cocktail on it in front of a cabinet, and then there's the old guy with the gun behind. So it's like,
Mhm.
was that guy stealing his booze and got shot?
Huh. And remember that piece of cut content, something about livers?
Yeah, they used to have livers, and they used to be like a boss soul equivalent, but they were called livers. So you would get like the liver of Gascoigne, the liver of the cleric beast. and
Completely
stuff.
forgotten that, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you like to know what else my research on the right side of the body has turned up?
Go
Mhm.
on.
Well, most diseases that are associated with one side are associated with the left side because, it's the pulmonary side. So this has been, it was a bit of a pain in the ass to research. But I did manage to find a few pieces that said that the right side is associated with Hep C, which is a blood-borne disease.
Ooh.
And also that it is associated with sleep disorders, which we know Gurman to suffer from.
Yeah, yeah. Gurman, who's also missing his right leg.
We'll get on to the which leg is
Yeah.
missing in a minute because you mentioned it in the last podcast that went up. As for superstitions, which the item description says that this is, in Poland, they believe that leading on the right leg is lucky.
Right.
I looked up the intro of Bloodborne, and the Pale Blood Hunter starts the game by getting out of bed with his left leg, which may explains why he goes on to have literally the worst day ever. The Spanish also believe that leading with your right leg is luckier than the left leg.
Right, right.
Others have the phrase "put your best foot forward." And whether you are an actor or whether you are a visitor determines what your best foot is. If you're an actor, you are meant to leave the dressing room with your left foot. If you are one of the
Right.
audience members, then you are meant to come in with your right foot.
Mhm.
And
Right.
make of that what you will. I'm sure I was going somewhere with this.
You mentioned the right foot being the lucky foot or whatever. This made me think of rabbit feet, I didn't know what they were until I saw that episode of Supernatural where there was this lucky rabbit foot or
Yeah,
something.
that's a
then
superstition.
Yeah, but then it brought a curse. So what if the moon presence is just collecting like rabbit feet for luck?
You want to know what, Sin?
What?
Guess what? Guess what Japanese animal's associated with the moon?
A rabbit?
Yeah.
You look at the moon from the other side of the world, you don't see a face, you see a rabbit.
What?
It's true.
That's
Well,
why the enemies in Mario Odyssey are rabbits, because they're from the moon.
And in Rhythm Paradise, when the rabbit
Yeah.
jumps into the moon, he like appears on it.
And the classic NES game Gun Knack. It's about rabbits on the moon.
And on Easter, you go to the store and you're surrounded by chocolate rabbits.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Anyway,
That's it.
Beasthood and the right leg.
Okay, thank you. So if you look at the picture of the old hunter trousers,
Yep.
on the right leg, I guess,
Yes.
they have like metal things.
Yeah, it's like a
Torniquet.
Torniquet.
Yes, yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
Who wants
Okay.
to go?
Yeah, sure. A tourniquet is a thing that when you have an injection and the doctor pulls something around your arm to make the veins bulge out, make it easier to inject. And the implication is that these are purposefully built for Yharnamites so that they can more easily inject the blood vials, because when you use the blood vial to recover your hit points, you see the hunter smash the blood vial into their right leg.
Yeah. It also might just be it's kind of restricting the flow of blood. So the idea is like, okay, there's this cursed blood, but if we wrap this thing around ourselves and restrict the flow, it might not. Because it's talk about it creeping up.
Like that.
Yeah, but Yharnamites don't understand anything. I mean, it's a superstition. It's nonsense. They're not real.
The only thing that
Because
the
it's like
Yharnamites understand is that Torgo serves the master.
Yeah. So it talks about how it creeps up the leg, which implies it starts and sort of moves up the body. So I think the idea is if you wrap something around, like restricting the flow of the blood, then it's going to be less likely to creep up your body. I think it's something like that. Yeah.
So, other than the old hunter trousers, what other pieces of evidence do we have in game that points to Beasthood creeping up the right leg?
There is... No, there's two. There's two that are in the game, and then there's a bunch of others that got cut out.
Tell us more.
So the two that are in the game are Gurman, because his right leg is a peg leg.
Ah, but you did a bit of talking about this on the last podcast. I hope this doesn't mess up the continuity, because I have no idea when this one's actually going to be broadcast. But the last one I listened to, you were talking about how it's missing one leg, and when the Pale Blood Hunter loses a leg in the bad ending, it's a different leg. And that leads me to believe that the loss of a leg was something that they had an idea for, but then it didn't fully end up fleshed out in the main game.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that the point of the old Hunter Trousers saying that is so they can say, oh yeah, you know how there's a bunch of missing legs in this, it's that. But it's like a sort of workaround for why it's that way, and it was something else initially. The confusing part is that Gurman is missing his right leg, and then when we get captured by the Moon Presence, we are missing our left leg. And, like, honestly, I'm pretty sure the reason for that is just the angle they choose to film you from.
But if they intended it to be an actual plot point, then they would have, like, put in the extra 5 minutes to make it the other leg. So, well, that's what leads me to believe that it was just something that they thought was going to be important originally, and then they just chucked in the bin.
I think it was a plot point originally, and then they kind of changed who Gurman was and what your relationship with him was. Because, like, early on, like, the concept of the character being a hunter is not even in there. Like, they went through a lot. But, like, I guess the other thing to keep in mind is, like, when you fight the boss version of Gurman, which is, from what we can tell, it's meant to be like Gurman in his prime, when he's no longer an old man. He's still got the missing leg, and his, like, the way that he moves and everything takes that into account.
And you also mentioned that we see him missing a leg in the trailer for the Old Hunters DLC.
Yeah, there's the Old Hunters trailer, where, again, this is weird because it is literally, it's a trailer. You don't know how seriously you're supposed to take it, but they did go as far as putting a model of Gurman in the fishing hamlet so they could show Gurman walking toward it, and it is the boss version with the missing leg.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, he would have been like maybe like a summon or something. I don't know. It would have been neat. But like, that model of Gurman is still there. Like, they left it in the map. So if I think Lance did it, he actually just restored Gurman, and you can just fight Gurman in the fishing hamlet. It's just the boss copied again.
What's the other thing then?
The other thing is the statues in Canehurst of the knights are all missing their right leg.
Yep.
Really? I never noticed that.
All the ones that are on the sides of the stairs when you go to meet Annalise. And, like, I had always assumed, oh, that's just like a glitch, like with the model, and they never fixed it. But no, it actually does kind of make sense now. In light of this, and in light of, like, not in the game anymore, but there was a removed boss who is like a Canehurst knight with a wooden leg, who's like hobbles around with a big scythe thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. when you fight Ludwig, he is like very clearly they divide his body into two, and half of him is the beast half and half of him is the human half. He actually has two heads. And the head that is we assume meant to be the beast head, the part that's more transformed and the eye has gone milky and there's the sort of the mouth coming out of the throat. That's the right-hand side.
Interesting.
And if we look at Volta, Volta's got the one eye in his helmet, because it says the other eye has rotted and the rotted eye is the right-hand eye.
Oh my god!
And if you look at like the Yharnamite characters, they all tend to have slightly asymmetrical features. Like they have the faces are lopsided.
Yeah.
The thing that sort of goes against the right side though, which is also in the game, is that the Yharnamites all have asymmetrical arms, but the longer arm that's got the hair on it is the left arm.
Huh.
Yeah, so I think the whole like right side of the body is Beasthood thing is something they maybe came up with sort of retroactively to explain the asymmetry of things.
I'm looking at different NPCs now, and the afflicted beggar has a thing over his head.
Yeah, he's got bandages.
Okay, never mind. It's over both his eyes.
Yeah, it looks like the right eye is the one that goes milky when you're blood drunk, on the basis of Volta.
Now, also, there was a Bloodborne trailer where we saw a person with eyes.
Yes.
Could you please elaborate?
People have eyes.
Okay, so the Bloodborne trailer, which is also the thing that plays if you leave the like console running on the opening title menu.
Used to call it an attract mode. You darn young'uns.
We used to call it an attract mode, and internally it is called advertise. So it kind of still is.
Mm-hmm.
That shows the hunter holding a blunderbuss to the head of a Yharnamite, who is like partially transformed. And it zooms in on their left eye, which is like going blood drunk and turning into the Cos Sun thing. But if you look at the right eye is in even worse shape. And it's basically just like there's not even a defined pupil anymore. It's just a hunk of discolored viscera. And they also have a bandage that's covering the right side of their face. So it looks like, but then like I'm just looking through the Yharnamite characters that we meet, and there's no real consistency to whether it's the left or the right side that's sort of going asymmetrical on them.
This basically supports the idea that this was something that went into the concept stage. Then they just went.
The old woman you sent to Erden Chapel, it's the left side of her face that's all like it's sort of starting to move away from the rest of it and move in a weird direction. But then the man, the bigoted old man, with him it's the right side that's sort of like twisting. So I think like they really played on like asymmetry. And then I don't know if it was ever very specifically meant to be the left or the right side, but then the DLC sort of tries to clarify that, yes, specifically it's the right side of you that's meant to change. So Volta is an interesting test case, because he's a character that you get to see at two different points in his life. So you see that the Volta that you run into, he's got the one eye hole in his bucket hat. And what happens is, like, when you get the bucket hat off Volta, it specifies that, like, he wore that because his eyes had rotted away. And it's the right eye that's rotted because he only has a hole for his left one. And it goes in about how, like, he became obsessed with vermin and his eyes rotted. But then when you see him, after you sort of redeem him, I guess, you get this, like, flashback to the young Volta, which is the Beast Eater version that you can summon, and he's got both his eyes. So you get to see, like, okay, this is a guy who, like, gives you a very specific case of, like, this is someone who spent so long hunting and so full of vermin that their eye was specifically the right eye that rotted away. And then the DLC also does the Ludwig thing, where it's the right-hand side of Ludwig that is the more beast-like than the left-hand side. So I think, like, it's a case of they started off with the idea of things being asymmetrical because the blood is sort of causing mutations that can't be controlled. And then what they ended up doing was, like, codifying later on in the DLC after the fact that, yeah, it's to do with the right-hand side of the body changing. But then they also say, by the way, this was just a Yharnam superstition. It's not necessarily true. So it could be that they just saw that, like, in some extreme cases, it was the right-hand side. It may actually just have been Ludwig, for all you know, because, like, Ludwig was like an early hero of Yharnam. So it could have been, like, once they saw that, you know, that it was the right-hand side of Ludwig that was changing, that led to the superstition that it was the right-hand side of the body that the Beasthood sort of crept up. But then you also have to factor in Canehurst, they looks like they were also amputating the right legs of people. And Gurman's right leg is amputated. So it looks, I mean, that would also mean it was a very, very long-term superstition that didn't just start with the Healing Church, because the Canehurst and Gurman both predate that.
Mm-hmm. Richie, I know you like Sakura a lot, and Sakura has some similar things going on to what we're talking about now.
Things, yes.
Yeah, what's so funny, Richie? Why are you laughing?
Nothing. It's a very tragic story. There's nothing funny about Sekiro.
Okay. All right. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Okay, so in Sekiro, they make a big point out of the reason that the sculptor has a prosthetic arm lying around is that it's his prosthetic arm. And the reason he has it is because he had killed so many people that he was tipping over into becoming a monster. Basically, they call this thing called Shura. And they say if you're like a psychopath and you bathe in blood and you start murdering, you'll become a thing called a Shura, which is what Wolf becomes in the Shura ending. So what happened was Lord Ishin is the guy who cut the sculptor's arm off, and he did it to save him, to say, like, I'm going to cut your arm off so you can't keep murdering people. And then Ishin had the prosthetic made as a replacement arm for the sculptor. So, even though obviously it's not the same universe, but it is the same developer team and it's the same director and the same writer, it's worth considering that he might be playing with the same set of themes again, because if you look at it, okay, Sekiro, to stop you tipping over and becoming a monster, we had to cut your arm off. Bloodborne also very big on, hey, the more beasts you kill, the more blood that you take in, the more monstrous you become. Maybe the reason that in version 0.5 of the 10,000 that we have, there's a whole lot of characters with one leg. It might be that they were deliberately having the legs amputated because then they couldn't rush out and hunt. They'd be confined to wheelchairs, like Gurman is, and like the Knights of Canehurst are. It's sort of like a means of like containing them in a sense. So it might be similar to that like they may have figured out, okay, in the old times of Canehurst, they would cut people's legs off. Maybe then it all sort of fed into this belief about the beast, but picking up the... I just remembered another thing. Sorry, I'll finish it off. So it's possible that the Yharnam, in-universe, the Yharnam belief might come from a Canehurst ritual where they did cut the legs off the knights to stop the knights... to make the knights easy to contain, basically, to stop them tipping over into blood drunkenness by killing too many people. So, there is another test case that we can look at that is very, very similar to Volta. And I will find them now. Sin, Dalek, do you do chalices much?
There was that horrible boss. Your hit points are halved.
Oh yeah,
I think I may have thrown the controller through the wall at that point.
Okay, I'll send this to Sin then. Sin, do you recognize these guys? And what can you tell me about the Labyrinth Warrior that might be relevant to Volta?
Well, their entire head is covered.
Yeah, it's exactly the same design as Volta's helmet, but it's cloth. So it's like the cloth covering of the head, and it's the left-hand eye has a hole for it, but the right-hand eye doesn't. And if these things ever steal your blood echoes, it does confirm that, yeah, they only have the one eye, because it's just that eye that will glow if they steal them.
Oh.
Yeah, so this looks like, okay, the Thumerians knew about this as well. Like, their eyes were rotting in the same way, and it was seemingly always the right-hand eye that rotted.
Hmm. So let me ask you. This whole Beasthood creeps up the right leg thing. Dalek, do you think it was real or it was just an urban legend?
I would have to say, I think the writers intended it to be real, but they lost it at some point, and they kind of tried to walk it back by adding an item description that said it was just an urban legend.
What about you, Richie?
I think basically the same thing. I think that they had a motif going. I mean, we know they did. They definitely had a motif going on early about missing legs being a thing with characters, and then some of it made it into the final game, but it wasn't really developed or explained very well. So then in the DLC, like a lot of the DLC does, they sort of tried to like loop it back around and say, okay, it's actually like it's this thing here. So they come up with this story like, oh, in the old legends, the beast blood crept up the right leg, and that's where it comes from. And it may have been something similar to that early on, but it's not something that they really developed much beyond just saying that. Same way that like we said, there's a lot of stuff in the DLC that just it sort of loops back around saying this thing is a Yharnam legend. So like Volta's backstory with the Constables and the Beast, they say like, here's a story of Volta and the Constables, and it's sort of how the League was formed, and then it's like, but this is a story that Yharnamites tell each other because they like telling stories about intolerant foreigners. And then you have like the old hunter set, like you notice a lot of the armor in Bloodborne, even if it's cloth, it's got a whole lot of metal charms and things all over it, and they specify in that, but like, yeah, there's this Yharnam legend that if you wear brass and other kinds of like metals, it will deflect blood away from you, even if it doesn't really defend you.
Okay, I really appreciate both of your answers, but what I was asking was more like in the city of Yharnam, right? You're in Yharnam.
Yeah, okay.
So
Okay.
whatever they're doing to keep the Beasthood from creeping up the right leg, is it working?
Well, obviously not. You've seen it. It's clearly not working.
Very little they are doing in Yharnam is preventing them from turning into Torgos.
Yeah, because the whole point is like all the Yharnam superstitions and things. Well, it's like it's sort of
It's a game about fake news, basically.
Oh yeah, because it's things that are literally happening, and then they come up with their own sort of half-understood explanation of why.
Exactly.
So like, yeah, so like people are turning into beasts, and it is causing asymmetry in the body. Yeah, so they link that to okay, it's to do. It must be. It's like if it's causing asymmetry, it must come from one side of the body to start with. That must be the right leg, and I guess maybe the right hand side was more common or something when they were transforming.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have like, well, they know that there's something wrong with the blood of Yharnam, but they blame the outsiders for it. They don't blame the actual source. It's like the outside. It's your fault you brought the beasts here when it's the other way around. So it's like, it's them coming up retroactively with explanations for things that they encounter.
So what they really need to do is use the scientific method to look at the things that are happening.
Well, that's what Lawrence did, and look what happened there. That was a discussion of Beasthood creeping up the right leg and asymmetry and peg legs. Is that why you wanted me to do the pirate?
Oh my god! No, I didn't! But I guess my mind just predicted it. It put it all together without me realizing.
Amazing. Yeah, and our guest was Dalek Sex. Do you want to just plug your social media?
Social media is a bit of a sore point at the moment because my idiot co-workers have convinced me to join TikTok and don't like to talk about it. But if you want to see me screaming obscenities about politics, then you can find me at The Voice of Sex on Twitter.
Well, thank you for coming, Dalek. Appreciate it. Thank you, Richie.
Thank you, Sin, and thank you, Dalek.
Most welcome.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.